Bluetooth speaker. Got it. Okay, all good. Lovely. It is March 25th, 2020, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. I am Jordan Bergtraum, head of product at Equip ID. The Product Mentor Program is a global initiative in over 20 countries around the world where mentors and mentees get paired up in the field of product management to help make better product decisions, better products, and most importantly, better product people. Learn more at theproductmentor.com. Again, I'm Jordan Bergtraum, one of the mentors in the program, and have been for I think 11 sessions now, and I highly recommend it. I think both being a mentor and a mentee, either one, is incredibly valuable. And today I will be leading a conversation on life as the first and only product manager at a startup. Please post your questions to the YouTube chat, and I will do my best to answer your questions as they come in and in real time. Let's start with a background on me. That way you know a little bit about how I have been influenced by the companies I've worked for and the domains I've been in. I have 13 years of experience specifically in B2B enterprise SaaS. And as you'd imagine, that has certainly impacted the type of product management that I get involved with. I admit that enterprise SaaS is different than consumer, and it's different than internal tools. So I just want you to appreciate my exposure so you can see that is going to influence some of the conversation I have with you today. I have 7 years, actually now a little bit more to be honest, leading product management functions, meaning being responsible for hiring and mentoring product people. And ultimately, I'm a big fan of making them better product people, which is one of the reasons I also decided to be part of the mentor program previously mentioned. I've also been working in a number of different domains, none of which are really related to one another. So I'm quite used to coming into a particular domain and having to learn it from scratch. I've been in education, pharma, facilities management, legal, and now I find myself back in facilities management. And this is the first time actually that I've worked for a company where prior domain expertise has come into play, which is exciting. And twice I've introduced product management to an organization, which is why I think I have the ability to talk to you about what it's like to be the first and only product person at a company, because twice I've been in that position now. And by product management, I mean I've been responsible for the market research, product marketing, product roadmaps, and to some extent, the delivery part of the product function as well, knowing that product delivery also involves engineering, of course, but I take responsibility for delivery as well, in that I think I can have an influence on time and high quality delivery by giving the engineering function the right reasons behind what we're building and how to build it right. So let me give you a quick overview of what to expect today from this conversation. First, some challenges that come with being the only and first, particularly the first product person in a startup environment. And then I'm also going to talk to you about methodologies for surviving those challenges. I'm not going to sit here and say they are all survivable, but I think many of them can be mitigated with some tips and tricks that I will give you from my experience. So let's jump right in. A problem. As the first product person, I think you just need to accept the fact that you will likely become frustrating to someone for many reasons that I don't think I'll get into right now. That'll come later in my presentation when I discuss various groups that you will come into contact with, that all product people come into contact with. Part of the problem that also exists is that in the absence of a product management function or a dedicated person to do that job, it becomes a shared responsibility across the C-level, the client success function, as well as sales. And as a result, they all start to appreciate their involvement in the product direction function, and parts of it are enjoyable. Product management can be a great job, and they learn to enjoy their participation in the product direction, design even. And when you come in as the first product person, it may feel like to them that you're now taking that away from them. And they all this time thought they were doing a great job of it. So that could result in a little friction. And at the end of the day, they may actually feel like, why is this new person with this title of product manager, or whatever the title is, gets to decide what's right for our product? Who are they? What qualifies them? They're new to the company. How does that make sense? I've been here for 6 years as the head of client success, doing great things here. Why should that change? What was I doing wrong as the head of client success in terms of giving direction to the CEO on what we need out of this product? And then that back into the question from these various people: do we really need product management? And that may sound like a silly question, and they probably don't ask that question directly and bluntly, but I will tell you, I've definitely felt that's what they're thinking. Do we need this person? What is their value add? How are they going to make my life better, if not worse? So how do we get around this? First, I'm going to tell you, earn your role. It's not just going to come. These folks, head of sales, client success, C-suite, they're not just going to let you come in, take over the roadmap, and listen to everything that you say. It's just not what's going to happen. So first off, don't take ownership too quickly. Okay, don't come in and think you're going to drive the roadmap from day one and start telling this company that you now work for what they should be doing. That is a great way to start off on the wrong foot. Second, become an expert. And what I mean by that is you got to learn the domain. If you don't already know it and it's not a domain you're familiar with, which is typical, I think, become an expert in that domain. And now there's no magic bullet to doing so. It involves some traditional things that you probably already know. It's getting out there, talking to your existing customers, sitting in on sales engagements, doing your own market research, looking at what's going on in your industry, read up on some publications, tap into blogs, tap into Twitter, Instagram if it's relevant, and try to learn as much as you can about the marketplace that your company plays in. And the reason for that, it's important to get that expertise, is so you know as much and ideally more than anyone else in the company, including the CEO. It is going to be your job to understand the marketplace and what problems that marketplace wants solved for them and that they're willing to pay for as part of the job. Next, especially in the beginning, you need to be an advocate for everyone. Now, ultimately, you're going to be an advocate for the product. But in the beginning, when you're new, before you're a domain expert, before you have that expertise, advocate on behalf of the head of sales, the head of client success. Be on their side. You're on their team. Why? Because you're one team. The last thing you want these people feeling is that you are friction, you are in their way to getting what they want to come out of engineering, what features they expect to come out. Advocate for them. Now, I'm not saying do everything they say, because that's what could happen if you take my advice too strictly. But what I really mean by being an advocate is make sure you align yourself with the company. You're on the side of the company. You're on the side. We're all on the same team. And what we all ideally want is for the company to succeed. Sometimes that means everyone doesn't get what they want. And in fact, most of the time, that means everyone doesn't get what they want. And that's normal. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to be honest and tell people that. But this is still a discipline that you could bring to the table very early on, which is things like we don't just add things to the roadmap without a conversation. We don't add things to the roadmap without analysis. We don't add things to the roadmap without understanding them. We don't add things to our roadmap and change our plans without talking to some customers, without talking to sales, without it being a thoughtful decision. We have a roadmap for a reason, is the point, and changing it should not be something you do super regularly, and it shouldn't be done without a really good reason. And that reason could be data. That reason could be a lot of high touch conversations. But be the person that brings that discipline to the table. Don't just change the roadmap because one person is chasing a shiny object. That kind of discipline you could bring right away. And I think you will get respect for bringing that discipline to the table, because most companies, before product management exists, have seen the thrashing that can happen to a company without product management bringing that discipline. The roadmap seems to either not be non-existent, or changing so often it feels like it doesn't exist, or even if it exists, it's changing so often there's no respect for it. And all these things aren't good for an organization. Next challenge. And first, your senior management. Think of that as your C-level, or top 4 people in your organization is who I'm referring to. So what's the challenges here? Some obvious things. They're going to be potentially reluctant to relinquish control. And the reason for that is typically these are the people that have been playing the role of product manager for years. Could be the CEO, could be a shared responsibility between, like I said earlier, sales and client success, and and the C-level. Second, they're going to expect potentially you to just execute their product wishes. What they think, just go do it. Again, that's not really what product management should be doing. Now, sometimes that's the role. Sometimes in a startup, that's what they hire for. They have a roadmap, they have vision, they know what they need to do, they know the order in which they want to do it, and they're just expecting the product manager to just go off and design the right solution for that problem. Sometimes that's the job, but product can do more than that. Again, all the discipline I previously mentioned about changes to the roadmap, I do believe you should play a role in asking all the right questions to even the senior management about, but what about the plans that we had? Do we really want to change that? Because a week ago, yesterday, we seemingly agreed that that plan made sense. And now you want us to work on this new thing and make that the new number one thing. And that means that one of the things we previously planned won't get done. And I am a believer in having that conversation. Zero sum game. You don't just add things to the roadmap without taking something off. That instills good discipline. It's a queue, but it's not a never ending queue, because that queue should only represent a fixed amount of time. What time period that is up to you. I'd say 6 months is a good time frame for a startup. Trying to predict the future beyond 6 months Probably impossible. I mean, not impossible, but not likely. So my point is, for as much as you want to be a good soldier and not get yourself in trouble with senior management, I think it is your job to question whether that is the best thing for the company. And if the answer is yes, fine. But I think offering as the product person to investigate if this idea is actually better than every other idea on the roadmap is a fair question and a fair offering, and you should offer to do that. And then go vet that by talking to existing customers, have a conversation with your sales function. Maybe look at the marketplace and kind of on your own. Think to yourself, will they buy this? Will they pay for it? Will it help retention? And lastly, don't come to the table with opinions when it comes to senior management in particular. Your opinion, sadly, does not matter. All that really matters is what you know, the facts, the data that you could bring to the table about your marketplace, about your product, about the problems that are most important. Have hard facts to back up what you want to do. And when you want to challenge senior management's ideas, if all you have is an opinion on something, their opinion is going to be given way more weight simply because of titles. And I found that time and time again. In a room full of opinions, the only opinion that matters is the person that has the biggest title or the most, sometimes the most seniority, but it's usually just title. So if the CEO's in that room and all they have is a room full of opinions, you get my point. The only opinion that matters is the CEO's. Just keep that in mind. Come to the table with facts. So my recommendations for the senior management product, senior management situation. Resign yourself to the fact that they are the boss. If they've got a bigger title than you or you report to them, if they tell you to do something and you've questioned it and you've given them all the data you have about why it is a good or bad idea, and they disagree and they tell you to do it anyway, don't put your job at risk. You just do it. And that's okay. That's the real world. Also, similar to some of the things I mentioned earlier, you're not against them. Don't be the bad guy. Be their right hand, okay, in terms of being helpful. You want to be a good company advocate, and be on their side. The last thing you want to do is upset senior management by making them feel that you're friction. You're not friction, you're discipline. And there's a big difference between the two. Discipline's good, friction is bad. And previously, as I mentioned, come to the table with new information. If not new, more. No more than they do in the aggregate. So what I mean by that, if the CEO comes to you with an idea for the new number one roadmap item that we should start as soon as this sprint is over, and it comes from one customer, you should go off and have conversations about this idea with 5 customers. Ask 5 customers about this. See what they say. They all agree that this is amazing and they'd love it and it's better than any other idea you have. Great, your CEO was right. You back him up, you come back, you say, hey, guess what? Love your idea. Other customers agree. It makes sense that this should be the new number one. We're going to start it at the end of this sprint. Now, however, what happens a lot of times is this isn't necessarily a widely socialized idea by the CEO. He had one conversation with one customer and it's a big customer and they're important. But you've got 20 customers, let's say. You go off and you have 5 conversations and let's say none of them want it on the roadmap. They all like it. It's not that it's a bad idea, right? We got plenty of great ideas. It doesn't mean they belong on your roadmap. The roadmap is full of greater ideas. It's all relative. There are going to always be tons of great ideas that are not on your roadmap. If 5 customers come to you and say, I love it, but I wouldn't change your roadmap because I love those more, that is important information you need to take right to senior management. Use that information because that's facts, not opinion. Okay, it's not your opinion. It's just facts coming from your customers, and use that to probably talk them down from adding this to the roadmap because it means 1 out of 6 customers wanted it. That to me is not statistics that say should be on your roadmap. And lastly, and this is obvious, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway. I put it in writing. I'm going to say it out loud. have well-defined roadmaps. In the absence of a plan, people will assume you have no plan. So if you can't visually show a roadmap, they will assume you don't have one. Even if it's up here, they can't see it. If it's not socialized and articulated or something that you could show to a customer, in the absence of a plan, what happens is everyone will give you a plan, their plan, which isn't necessarily the right plan. Next challenge, working with engineering. First off, you might land up with engineers that are thinking to themselves, why is this product manager setting my timelines? Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking to yourself, well, do we set timelines? And the answer generally is yes. That's not true. Sometimes, right? Sometimes we know there are external forces, like an event, a customer commitment, which we always try to avoid, but sometimes we can't. So we land up pushing engineering for timelines. That can be frustrating to them, especially when you're new, especially in a startup, when they usually were taking their direction and timelines from someone else. Also, having your engineers be offshore adds a whole other layer of challenges, which is also quite common in startups, simply because of the economics. And when you're dealing with offshore engineers, I think if you haven't yet worked with them, you'll find that the time zone differences can cause some friction and challenges. Cultural differences, language barriers, all play a role in making it more challenging. So be respectful of that. Some engineers also have the wrong perspective on what product managers do. They just expect you to be their documenter of all the things they should be doing. Write it down, please. Please add that to my queue. Write up the requirements in great detail, asking you to exhaust yourself potentially, just documenting things. And that's not necessarily fair. And I am a believer in the 80-20 rule, that after you get like 80% of the fidelity of the actual requirements for what you're designing, the next 20%, the value starts to drop significantly. The value of that first 80% is amazing in documentation. The rest of it should probably be done via communication, because it starts to get expensive to do that documentation and the value drops. And they also will expect you to give them, well, full requirements, because you're the product person. You know everything we're going to be doing over the next year. So lay it all out for me before I give any estimates. Again, not a reasonable expectation. Engineers should understand what estimates mean. They need to focus on the word estimate. An estimate is just that, an estimate. You tell them you're not going to hold their feet to the fire. You're not going to use it for timelines. You're just using it for costing. So you could figure out the ROI of something, because without the I side of ROI, you can't figure out what the ROI is going to be, right? So some recommendations on dealing with engineering to help alleviate some of these problems. First off, bring them into the loop. Don't be this barrier between them and the problem and the marketplace. Be the conduit. You are that conduit. Make sure you're always explaining to them why they are building what they're building. Similarly, bring them facts, not opinions, because they're going to have their own opinions on what the product should be. And if all you have is your opinion, well, I'd argue, why should they listen to you? Who are you? Why do you know better if you just have an opinion on the product and not hard facts about why the product needs to be what it's going to be, why we're building what we're building, what problems we're solving, why we're solving those problems, and then even some facts on through conversation with users on the design. Some usability tests would be fantastic, or at least just some high-touch conversations, which you can include them on if they would like to be. Never had a problem with that. They can listen in to the user feedback sessions, and that will bring them closer to you and view you as a value add rather than a barrier. Always listen. Be a good listener. Your engineers, a lot of times, can be some of the smartest people in your organization. I think we've all come across some pretty smart engineers in our day. We should respect that. And just because the engineer is coming from engineering and not the outside world doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't warrant going through the vetting process of maybe sharing that with customers, sales, just like any other idea. Doesn't matter that it came from engineering. A good idea is a good idea. And be their champion and partner. So by champion, I mean laud their successes. When they do a good job, let the company know, let everyone know. Hey, as a form of reward, they deserve respect when they do a good job, and be that conduit between them and the rest of the company when they do things well. And don't be afraid to hold them accountable when they don't. That's fine too. And I know that can be challenging because engineering is a difficult job when it comes to timelines, that they are regularly late. We know that, later than they thought, for a number of reasons. I'm not going to go into the why there, but we just know that they often deliver things later than at least we'd hope, and they deliver things often even later than they said they would. It's not an exact science. And partner with them. You're there, try to be their friend. It doesn't always work. There's going to be natural friction because you want this much built in this much time. They tell you I can only build this much in this much time, and you don't get it. And if you happen to be an engineer in a past life, great, because I think that helps you build a relationship with the engineers and have a deeper respect for what they do and why it's a hard job. And if you're not like me, I've never been an engineer, I think over time and experience with working with engineers, you'll learn how to partner with them. Next group to talk about, client success. And just a reminder, feel free to add any questions to the YouTube chat. So oftentimes client success were the product managers. And what I mean by that is they were wearing that hat. Prior to you, I bet you client success was playing a big role in product, at least the design, if not direction. Why? Because they were the ones that were out there with the customers all day long. So why wouldn't they be? They can be very helpful in identifying opportunities for retention and upsell opportunities. And that's not a challenge and in amongst itself. I'll tell you what the challenge is. Don't go to client success expecting them to tell you what brand new products and new arenas and new verticals and entirely new problem spaces to solve. That's not where they succeed. That's not what I would expect them to know. They know what current clients using the current product need out of the current product in order for it to be great or better. But they don't often think about brand new opportunities that are outside of the realm of your core product. It's just not the world they live in. So be respectful of, don't expect that. So some recommendations on helping with the client success relationship. Listen, again, I know I said this with engineering, but it's very true. Client success, respect them. They spend their entire lives with customers and having to be the front lines. And what comes along with being that front line? It's understanding your customers. They're going to hear a lot. They're going to hear a lot of the same things. They're going to hear a lot of new things. They're probably going to send all of it to you. And it is, the hard part, it is your job to figure out and filter how much of this is just low value enhancements they want that don't have great impact and are just being asked for because there is no cost to a customer to ask. So in the world of free to ask, you'd ask for everything. Keep that in mind. Why wouldn't a customer ask for everything? Until a product manager comes in and asks them the right questions about their biggest problems. Which problems drive them the craziest? Which problems are their bosses asking them for? What keeps them up at night? What would make them a superhero within their company? Those kind of questions that get them really thinking about big problems within their program that, if were solved, would be really needle moving for them, right? But still, point is, listen and stay tapped in with your client success function. 100% expose them to your roadmap, not just the roadmap itself, but the process. Let them know that there's a process. Let them know what went into that roadmap. Let them know why that roadmap doesn't actually reflect maybe what they think. When they're hearing all this stuff from their 7 customers, that this is something on the roadmap that they have never heard of. So where's it coming from? You better have an answer for that. You better know where it came from, why it's on the roadmap, who asked for it, what the ROI is, what's the justification. That's okay. It's okay for client success to question the roadmap. Nothing wrong with that. And also be careful. Again, it's all about in that world of opinions when you're dealing with a fellow client success person. And let's just assume for the moment, titling does not put you or them above one another. They're your peer. Never act like your opinion is more valuable than theirs. Your information, facts, data will be more valuable than potentially their data. Say that only in that your data should be better than theirs. You should be talking to a wider audience than them, ideally. Okay, now in a startup, again, if there's one client success person and they know all the customers, that does get a little complicated where both of you may be just as familiar. And in truth, I will say I've found at times the head of client success will be more familiar with some of the details about usability issues because they're talking to the customers more than you are, because you've got other parts of your job and all they're doing primarily is out there in the field with the customers. So sometimes their opinion is more valuable than yours at times. But my point is, don't ever act like your opinion is more valuable than their opinion. Play a game of facts and data. Do your best to be more aware of the key client's objectives and business needs than they are. Have those objective level questions. Because again, client success doesn't necessarily go out there and ask the most clever questions about product discovery. So influential clients, what are the challenges there when you're a startup PM? So they may very well have the CEO's phone number, yet they barely know who you are. You're new. You're the new PM. They haven't necessarily met you yet. Maybe they have. They were introduced to you by whomever, someone in client success. But the point is that they've had for the past year a relationship directly with the CEO. So why would they go to you when they have a product need when they can pick up the phone and call the CEO? It's a challenge. Certain clients also, and this is probably not news, have some pretty high and sometimes unreasonable expectations. So what can you do about this? Again, be an advocate for influential clients and their pipeline to getting things into the product, but in a disciplined way. And what I mean by that is don't say yes to everything. The only thing what you do though is by advocating for them is you commit to taking their ideas seriously. You commit to researching it. You commit to comparing it to your current roadmap. You commit to having a really, just take that seriously and review if it makes sense that this idea that they have is better than your roadmap ideas. And if so, it will be in your roadmap. But conversely, if you discover that this idea is not better than your roadmap ideas, that be honest with them, and then you can't justify putting it on your roadmap. It's not the healthy thing for your business. Also, this is a little on the nose, but don't be their puppet, right? Just because they ask doesn't mean you do it, like I was saying earlier, okay? You don't commit to doing something for them to the best of your ability. You only commit to putting it through the appropriate paces to determine if it's something that makes sense to be on the roadmap. And lastly, I suggest you include influential clients on your roadmap. No, sorry, your advisory board. An advisory board is a collection of key customers and the right thought leaders at those key customers with the purpose of getting their feedback and input on your product roadmap and designs to help identify the right problems to solve and the best way to build solutions for those problems. Without getting into an hour-long conversation on advisory boards, which I'm a big believer in, some of the key benefits are it puts your large and influential clients together, and it exposes them to the two things. One, that they're not the only customer that you have, and it exposes them to this on a regular basis for as frequently as you're meeting, and reminds them of that there's more than one customer, and that there is a democratic process that you're trying to bring to the table by involving 8 of your customers and get the input of all and come up with a plan that is representative of the best for many, not what's just good for one. Let's talk about what you might come across when dealing with sales. Their interests are aligned with closing deals too often, and this is not their fault. The way they're compensated through, you know, they get paid based on the deals that they close, that can lead to a short-term way of thinking, meaning, well, I have this one deal on the table, it's close to closing, but they're only willing to do it if we build this gigantic feature for them that seems proprietary, right? So they can ask for that. And potentially no other prospect and no existing customer wants that. It happens. So just keep that in mind. And that's a challenge because they're not necessarily going to ask for things that are going to help them close the next 10 deals. They may ask for something that's just about closing current deal they're working on or that they see coming in the pipeline. They think kind of transactionally, one deal at a time. And they can be very influential. Sales kind of important, don't you think? They're the ones out there that are responsible for bringing in revenue. Whoever's playing the role of salesperson, and sometimes you have a sales guy, sometimes it's just the CEO, they can have a lot of influence because new customer acquisition sometimes is the most important thing for a startup and oftentimes is the only most important thing. Now that and retaining the customers that you have, right? Always. But sometimes you realize, hey, our existing customers are pretty happy. Things are going well, serving them well, providing them value. Great. So we can really focus on, oh, got to get more customers. We got to drive revenue, right? Some recommendations. So there is a question I saw it just came in. So given startups have only a few or no customers, it seems like user data would be hard to come by. How do you think about prioritizing or finding opportunities and problems without existing user data? That is a good question, especially when dealing with in the startup world. You're right. You may not have enough customers to get statistically significant sample sizes. And I'll be honest, I've worked in larger companies too. And the type of data I get, I would not call like enough data points to be statistically significant. I would say when I have 100 customers, if I talk to 8 of them about an idea, that's awesome. It's a lot of data. So first, these numbers in at least B2B SaaS, enterprise SaaS, where I come from, these numbers don't need to be huge in terms of the number of unique customers you talk to. Now, when it comes to real like data, I do believe if you plug, tools into your product like Google Analytics that we're all familiar with, there is data to be obtained there in a volume that could be useful. Even if it's only 20 users, I still think there's a lot you can potentially glean from looking at just those user patterns of 20 users. Again, I'd also say be careful about how much weight you put on just the data. If you notice something isn't being used, don't just go off and sunset it and stop investing in it. Research that. Try to find out, go talk to people. Why aren't you using it? It might just be that they don't even know it exists. It might be that they don't understand the feature, so they don't use it. It might be something else. It might just be they don't think they need it or they don't know what the value of it is. So it's not that they don't want it. And you could end up sunsetting something that they actually would use, and that would be terrible. So some recommendations when dealing with sales. Help them sell more product. Obviously, right? This is all about alignment. Again, don't be anyone's enemy, but at the same time, again, I'll use the word again and again. There's discipline there. So talk to them, find out what's going to help them sell. But it's all through the lens of helping them sell the next 10 customers, 20, 50. Amazing. Not one at a time, because limited resources, you want to build stuff that will help you close 10 deals, not just one at a time. I'm not saying this is easy. When you're an early startup, one customer, the next customer, that next prospect, just getting them to sign, doing whatever it takes to make that happen can seem like that's all that matters. And it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard to have the discipline to say no to a deal, to walk away from a deal as an early startup, tell sales you're not going to build them something they need to close a deal. Sometimes that salesperson's the CEO and you're going to say no to him. Nope, I'm not building that. That's not going to happen, right? If it's the CEO. But there's no harm in questioning it and say, look, I feel like we have a roadmap. It was well thought out. We thought this was roadmap would help us unlock 10 different customers, 20. That was the reason we did this and set it up this way. And now we're going to interrupt that plan to try to close this one deal. Is that really worth changing the roadmap for? Do we really want to sacrifice what's on the roadmap right now for this one prospect? Make them think about that. Make them answer that question. If the answer is yes, that happens to be the CEO, and he says, yep, I'm so close, it's worth the effort. I don't mind adding this to the roadmap and taking this off the roadmap to make it so. Okay, then you followed some decent discipline. There was a thought of add this, subtract this. It's the right thing for the business right now. This is guaranteed X dollars of recurring revenue that we can't walk away from. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And now you've been helpful. No problem. And always contrast their needs against the existing roadmap. Like I just said, even if it's the CEO, just ask the question. Let's look at our roadmap. Remind ourselves of our plans. Remind ourselves that we had a plan. It was a good plan. At least it was a good plan as of yesterday. Now we're talking about changing it. Does that feel right? Take a deep breath. Contrast that. Say, let's start at the bottom of the list and say, is it more important than this? Yep. This one? Yep. This one? Nope. Okay. So what we're really saying is you think it belongs here. And that means we're also going to take number 5, or the last one on the list, whatever that number is, we're going to take it off. And that may mean we never do it. They're just saying it's no longer part of our short-term 6-month plan. If people agree to that, great. You brought some discipline to the conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, it's all about trying to work with sales to build capabilities that will help them close another 25 deals. So I've downloaded you with a lot to think about. I appreciate that. But let's summarize. A couple of key takeaways. So if you're only going to walk away with a few handful of nuggets, what would those be? In general, you want to be an advocate. You don't want to be a friction. You don't want to be a barrier to people feeling like, I used to be able to get things done so much faster before product management existed. So that's a bad thing, right? So act more as though you are the advocate. You are the way they do get things done, but not everything. You are the way people get the right thing done, the right thing for the company, so that the product is right, so that the company is right from the sense that the product is aligned with the business's strategy. That's what I mean by advocate. You're an advocate for the product being right. Not that you're right, not that they're right, just that the product is right. Develop expertise. Easier said than done, but figure out clever ways to become an expert in what the market wants and what users need in order to have their problem solved effectively. Lastly, always bring facts, not opinions. Your opinions are only relevant if everyone else in the room does not have a title as great as yours, or they have not been around as long as you have. That's not always likely. So come to the table with information, data, facts. And along the same lines, do your best to know more than anyone else in the company about what the marketplace is really asking for. Not easy to do all the time. And sometimes you just get sucked into, and I have experienced this personally, making sure the product gets designed right, that you don't spend enough time out in the real world finding out what problems should be solved. And lastly, listen. Listen to everyone. Listen to all their ideas. Most of the time, they'll be good ideas. Maybe not great, but good. Some of them will be great and not roadmap worthy, and others will be great and roadmap worthy. But always be listening. For no other reason, it shows respect. That what you're all about is being that conduit where ideas come in and you are responsible for figuring out if they belong on the roadmap. So thank you, everyone, very much for your time and listening. So thank you for joining for my discussion on being the first and only product person as a startup at a startup. As always, this presentation will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And also, if you're interested in becoming a mentor, go sign up today at theproductmentor.com. And don't forget also, if you're interested in being a mentor, sign up for sure. Being a mentee, signing up makes sense today versus tomorrow because it's a long list. So the earlier you sign up, the more likely you are to get into the program. And also, if you happen to be looking to fill a new product job with great product people, visit theproductjobs.com. Luckily and amazingly, it's free. So why wouldn't you? And finally, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel, and see you all next time. Goodbye. Have a lovely day.